Welcome back to the Just Grillin' Outdoor Living channel. I'm Sam. In this video, I'm going to show you how to make some amazing ribs on your Kamado style grill. When it comes to making juicy, amazing ribs, there's three things you need to focus on. The first is your prep work. The second, the temperatures you're cooking at. And the third, how long you're going to be cooking at those temperatures. If you can dial in all three of those things, you're going to be making amazing ribs that make all of your friends and family jealous. And I'm going to show you how to do that right now. But before I start, I just want to cover a couple important things to us here at Just Grillin' Outdoor Living. I'm going to show you a lot of different products in this video that will make your life easier when it comes to cooking ribs. Now, I'm not saying that you need to use every single thing that I show you in this video, but if something does pique your interest and you're local to us, please give us that first opportunity to earn your business. Now, if you're not local to us, we also have an online store that you can check out as well. The next thing is a super thanks, and you can do that right here on this video. For just a couple of dollars, you can show your appreciation and thanks for all the knowledge you're going to learn in this video. You can also like, subscribe, and comment on the video, whether it's a question or you just want to say, hey, thanks for the video. All of those things help us out a ton, and those are free to do. Now, the key to any successful cook is prep work. And before we go inside and do any prep work, your actual prep starts out here at the grill. So let me show you what we need to do out here before we go inside and get our ribs prepped. And I also want to add, if I don't answer something that you have a question on, please leave it in the comments and I'll be sure to get to it. So let's go ahead and dive in. If you've been cooking with a Kamado style grill for a long time, a lot of what I'm about to go through is already going to be second nature to you, and you probably already do this. But if you're new to using a Kamado grill, doesn't have to be a Kamado Joe, it could be a Big Green Egg, a Primo, anything of that sort. These are definitely going to be things you always want to do, regardless if it's ribs or something else. So the first thing in terms of getting the grill prepped is we want to make sure that we have fresh charcoal and that we've gotten rid of all the old charcoal that's in there. Now, unless this is your first time using the grill, you're typically always going to have a lot of old charcoal that's spent in there, and we need to stir up that ash. That's the first step of making sure that we get the grill prepped, so that way we have proper airflow and we have plenty of fuel for the cook. Now, we want to use a good quality lump charcoal throughout the cook. This is just one of the few offerings that we have at Just Grillin' Outdoor Living, the sugar maple charcoal. These are going to be large to medium-sized pieces, so they're great whether you're smoking or doing high heat grilling. So they're not going to be too thick to where it takes them forever to light, but they're also not going to be too thin to where they just burn up way too fast and you're going through the charcoal. It also has a really, really light flavoring to it, and so it's not super overpowering. So I recommend this charcoal for a lot of people because it's great flavor for one, and two, especially when you're cooking for people, people tend to be a little finicky about flavors and things like that. This charcoal gets zero complaints ever. No one ever comes back to us and says, I didn't like it. Now, the only thing people might not like is the price point of it, because it is rather expensive, but it's phenomenal charcoal. I do recommend trying it at some point. The next thing we're also going to make sure that we have on hand are some wood chunks. Now, the flavoring is really going to depend on what seasonings and things you're using and what kind of flavors you're going for. Today, I'm just going to be using some apple chunks. Now, I've got 4 chunks in total here. For some people, they might think that's way too many. I think 4 is a pretty good amount. If anything, maybe 3. But there's also going to be people out there that think, I'm not using enough wood chunks here. That is a myth. That is absolutely false. 4 wood chunks for a smoke that's only going to last about 3 hours or so, maybe 3.5. 4 is plenty. That's why I said 3 is probably enough. 4 might even be overkill, but this is the right amount of wood chunks. And we don't need to do anything to them either. Some people are gonna say, oh, the wood chunks, they burn up and things of that sort. Let me soak them before. You don't need to do that. You just wanna keep them as is, drop them in there when you're laying the charcoal. These aren't gonna burn up that fast, or at least Just Grillin Outdoor Living's wood chunks are not gonna burn up that fast. Now you're gonna notice on ours that you still have some of the bark on the outside because our wood chunks are naturally cured and allowed to dry. Whereas a lot of commercial ones, can't really think of a brand name to give you as an example, but I know a lot of the ones that you're gonna find in like the hardware stores that come in the plastic bags, those are kiln dried to make them ready for sale much faster than our wood chunks are. But you lose so much flavor when you buy wood chunks in the plastic bags like that. So if you want really good wood chunks, I do recommend picking up a sack from Just Grillin Outdoor Living. The other thing we're gonna do inside this grill, and I mentioned you don't have to use everything that I'm using in this video, and this is gonna be one of those products. Now I'm not gonna point that out on every single thing, but just to reiterate that I did mention that earlier. So this drip pan, which I've lined with foil, we're gonna put on top of our deflector plates inside of the Kamado grill. I don't like dealing with a mess. Now Kamado grills are self-cleaning, so this isn't as big of a deal on this style grill, but I still prefer to keep as much mess out of the grill as I can, so that way I don't have to do one of those self-cleaning processes as frequently. Now again, you don't have to use this, but this is gonna catch all of the drippings from our ribs. Now if you're doing something like a brisket or a pork butt, this is also an amazing thing to have, so that way all of those drippings and stuff stay confined. And the reason that I have the foil here is so that way all I have to do when everything cools down is take the foil up, ball it up, throw it in the trash, and then I don't even have to clean the pan. Now if you didn't want to do it with the foil, it's a stainless steel pan, so you can absolutely clean it, but I prefer to do this because again, it takes minimal effort to do it, and that way my cleanup time is gonna be less because I don't know anyone out there that enjoys cleaning anything. I don't enjoy it at least, so I'm trying to make my life easier. Now, if we do everything that I talked about, we're gonna be in great shape for a nice clean grill that's gonna have a good burn to it. And the temperature that we're gonna look for with these ribs to start out, we're gonna change temperatures throughout the cook, but we're gonna start out is at 275 degrees. Now, depending on your Kamado style grill, you could, if you have a Kamado Joe, you could have a 3rd generation that has the slow roller. If you have one with the slow roller, I would recommend using it. I'm using the Connected Joe, which is gonna automate a lot of the cook process for me. So I just have 2 half-moon deflector plates, though your 3rd generation grill still does come with those as well, so you're more than welcome to use that. But if you have a slow roller, you still can fit one of these pans right on top of the slow roller if you wanted to. And it's not gonna affect anything throughout the cook either, which is good. So once we have the grill prepped, we're gonna go ahead and start it and get it to 275 degrees because we need the temperature to stabilize on the grill. Something that you maybe have heard people use the term good smoke and bad smoke, I'll show you that once this grill gets rolling. So that way you know the difference of when your grill is actually ready to cook with. Just because it might say 275 on the temperature gauge does not mean your grill is ready to cook with. You have to wait until you get to the good smoke, so that way you have no bitter flavors whatsoever, and you get that amazing charcoal flavor. Now, if you have any questions on that, again, leave it in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer it for you. Let's head inside, and let's get our ribs prepped. We're still on step 1 of our 3-step plan for success, which means we're in the prep phase still. We've got the grill rolling, or at least started at this point. Now we're on the interior portion of getting our ribs ready. I want to go through some of the tools and things that I'm going to use, as well as the flavors, before we start seasoning up the ribs. Getting the ribs prepped it's relatively straightforward. This takes longer, explaining everything and doing all of this, but I'm doing it so that way you have a good, well-rounded understanding of why I'm using this, what benefit it serves you at home, so that way you have an enjoyable experience as well. So first thing I want to talk about are knives and cutlery. You don't need multiple knives. You can get away with both. I've definitely sliced my ribs at the end with this flexible fillet knife, but I do like the flexible fillet knife for trimming my ribs. Now, grocery store ribs, store-bought ribs, for the most part, you're just gonna be taking off a little bit of fat. Most people are not buying full spare ribs that you're gonna have to shape. Now, if you're buying those types of ribs, then yes, you're gonna want like a cook's knife, something a little more heavier duty, because you're gonna need to break bones. But when you're buying store-bought and grocery store ribs, for the most part, it's just a little bit of fat and things like that that you're gonna be taking off. So I like the flexible fillet knife because it's a very thin blade, so it's not gonna gouge the meat, and then it's easy to navigate with that flexibility. Now this 8-inch artisan butcher knife is really good for slicing the ribs at the end. It's a really versatile knife that I like for a lot of different things. What makes it great for slicing is the curvature shape, and then if you look really closely at the end, it's sharp all the way through. So when you're making that slicing cut, you can start to just lift the knife like this naturally, and you don't have to come back in and do any sawing back and forth. You're gonna get one real nice clean cut. So I recommend both of these knives for ribs and plenty of other things as well, but I do enjoy using them with ribs because it makes my life a little bit easier. So I use this on the prep side, and I use this on the pretty much the eating side, the back end of the cook, when I'm ready to slice them up to serve. The next thing that you're gonna wanna have, and I think everyone should have, are disposable gloves as well as some heat protection gloves. Now we offer a couple different varieties of heat protection gloves. These are my favorite, especially for something like this where you're gonna need to touch the meat on the grill, because you can put these on and layer them with the disposable gloves on top. So you're gonna keep the cotton gloves clean, and then you can just easily throw these away. And the reason that I like having disposable gloves on hand as well, you don't have to stop every time you're doing something and wash your hands. Peel them off, throw them away, put on a new set, so that way if you do need to do something where you need to stop and, go help your kids with something, go help your wife, the dog knock something over, you can just quickly go fix that stuff. So I always recommend having disposable gloves on hand. And then the high heat gloves are very critical in my opinion, because it just makes everything much easier for you. Butcher paper is another thing that we're gonna use. Now, people do tend to use foil, and you definitely can use foil. You're gonna see I do have some Reynolds wrap here with me. I use the aluminum foil more so for keeping things clean, keeping pans clean of that sort, and in my prep work, so that way I don't have as much mess to clean up. I wanna wrap my ribs later on with the butcher paper. The reason I wanna use the butcher paper, it allows the ribs to breathe. So foil is gonna steam cook your ribs. The moisture will escape through the butcher paper, but it's still gonna insulate your ribs. So you're getting that nice heat protection. The ribs are still gonna cook, but they're not steam cooking. So that way, especially if you have a nice, well built up bark, it's not gonna soften and you're not gonna lose that nice bark. One thing that's nice about our butcher paper too, is that it comes with one of these nice tubes to store it in. Most butcher paper that you buy out there, it's just gonna be wrapped in a plastic thing that you just you take off, and then your butcher paper is loose. So what do you do with it? One reason I really like our butcher paper is this tube, especially for where I have to store my butcher paper. So that's just something convenient. And one reason that if you do buy butcher paper and that annoys you about not having something to store it in, it's a reason to get it from us. Next thing I'm going to be using in this cook is a cooling rack and one of these pans. When I cook with a pellet grill, I'll use this setup and just take the ribs right out to the grill. The Kamado, I'm not gonna do that, but I am gonna use this in my prep here in the kitchen because it's gonna make things easier. Now I'm gonna line this tray with aluminum foil, and then when I'm seasoning them, the ribs that is, I'm gonna have them right on the cooling rack and just be able to make my mess and then ball it up in the foil, because all the seasoning is just gonna drop down underneath the tray. And then when it comes time to sauce them and get them ready, same thing. I'm just gonna line this tray again with foil, do everything I need to in there, make my mess, wrap the ribs up in the butcher paper, take them back out to the grill, and my mess again, super contained, super easy. So that way I don't have to hear my wife complain that I'm making too much of a mess. The last thing to cover before we start getting the ribs ready is our flavors. Now we've covered the charcoal and the wood chunks, so what seasonings and sauces are we using? For seasonings, we're gonna use a sweet heat seasoning from Cheshire pork. And for those of you watching, some of you might even be making ribs using Cheshire pork. They're one of the premier brands that produces pork in the US, and their seasonings are really, really good. The sweet heat, it's gonna be a little more spicy than it is sweet, but that's okay because the sauce that I picked out is really sweet, and so that's gonna balance that out for us. And that's the Tennessee barbecue sauce from Gentry's Barbecue. It's gonna be an amazing flavor profile. Something that you might see a lot of people do is spritz their ribs, and I've done that in plenty of videos as well. To show you some different variety, we'll be using Roscoe's mop sauce versus spritzing with apple cider vinegar. So this is gonna have apple cider vinegar in it, and then some other ingredients as well. You'll see it a lot with pork butts using this, but you can definitely use it with ribs too. It's gonna add some nice acidity to the ribs, as well as keep them very moist for us. So you're gonna see that in the cook when we use that. We're gonna use it maybe 3 to 4 times kind of in the first 2 hours of the cook. About every 20 minutes to half hour roughly, we'll use this. That's everything that you need to know about to use to make a nice, successful, easy cook. So let's go ahead and get the ribs seasoned up. If you wait to take your ribs out of the package until you put them here on the tray, it's nice because it helps keep your mess contained, because we're gonna throw away this foil at the end anyway, and the purpose of why we're using it is to keep everything clean. Step number 1, we wanna make sure that we pat the ribs dry. This is gonna make taking the membrane off relatively easy. This is one thing I'm not saying is the best way to do it, because as the saying goes, there's a lot of ways to skin a cat. But I always find it easy to do is I just use a spoon, and I use the back end of a spoon to kind of get underneath here. I prefer to do it this way versus using a knife, so that way I'm not gouging at anything, and it's relatively easy. This is my personal way of doing it. I'm not saying it's the best way, but it works, and it's easy to get it done. See? We've got, and I don't have to go all the way through with the spoon, I just go to a decent amount. And then, you see, I like to start in the middle here because it makes it easier to kind of put equal pressure and pull from both ways. You see how that's just coming up from both ends like that. And you can just take your time, there's no need to rush through it. Okay, that side's off. And that's one membrane easily ripped off. So with these ribs, looking at them, there's not, let's say, a ton of fat that I want to take off, but looking at stuff like this piece right here, I for sure want to make sure that this comes off. This isn't anything that anyone's going to want to bite into. And so let's just use our knife. And we will just get that cleaned up a little bit. There's nothing wrong with a little bit of fat in your bite. You just don't want a ton of fat. You see, I'm just lightly shaving off what I can without gouging into the meat. And this piece. You might see a lot of people use mustard as a binder. I'm not going to use that personally here. I'm not in a rush today. A lot of the times you're going to use mustard as a binder if you're in a rush and you don't want to give these ribs the time for this stuff to sweat in. We're not in any particular rush, so I'm going to let this do that. Mustard isn't going to hurt yourself if you're using it in terms of your flavoring. I'm sure there's someone out there that thinks that it does, but for the most part, it just allows the seasoning to stick better and faster. And then it also has some acidity to it, which adds to the flavoring profile. Now that the underside is seasoned, we're just gonna leave this for about 15-20 minutes uncovered out here on the counter and let that start to absorb and soak in. And then after those 15-20 minutes, we'll come back, we'll flip them over, we'll do the top side, give them another 15-20 minutes, and then they're gonna be ready for the smoker. Just doing the same process for the top side. Just gonna get it nice and coated. And now we're in business. Our ribs are seasoned. We're just gonna give this 15-20 minutes. The grill, I already know, I took a peek at it right before this, is ready to go. So in 15-20 minutes, we're gonna put these on the grill. While we're waiting for the last of the seasoning to sweat in, I mentioned good smoke versus bad smoke. Let's address that right now before we start cooking the actual ribs. Do you see any smoke coming from the top control tower? No. And if you can, it's very minimal. Two reasons for that. One, the top vent is barely cracked, so a lot of that smoke is staying inside of the smoker. Second reason, we have good smoke. Good smoke is either gonna be very thin and blue, or you're barely gonna be able to see it, which with the camera's not gonna pick it up nearly as well as your eyes would in person, so that's why it's tough to see it right now. But if you had thick, billowy smoke that was white in clouds, that is bad smoke. That is not what you would want in this scenario. So right here, I know the grill has good smoke and we're ready to go. And when we open the lid to put the ribs on, that's when you're probably gonna see a little bit more of that smoke because most of it is loitering right there inside of the grill because there's not too much room for it to escape for how narrow we have that top control tower. We're gonna put the ribs on top side facing up. When you put them on, you wanna scrunch them together. That way they cook nice and evenly. When you take them out of the fridge, they'll tend to expand a little bit as they warm up. We'll leave them just like that. And then in about 20 minutes, 30 minutes, we're gonna come back. We're gonna use our Roscoe's mop sauce and help keep these things nice and moist and tender. It's time to do our first round of the mop sauce on here. Now, this is still relatively early in the cook, so a lot of the seasoning in the bark is still trying to set itself. So we don't want to put an extreme amount of the mop sauce on there right now at this point. As we get closer to kind of the 2-hour mark before we do the wrapping, then will be a good time to put a little bit more of that on there versus right now. So you're just gonna see me kind of with the basting brush, just let the stuff kind of drizzle on there versus brushing it on there because I don't want to do anything with the seasoning. I still want that seasoning to stay where it's at, but we do want to keep these tender and moist. Everything looks like it's staying pretty moist, so we're not going to put an extreme amount, but we're still back here for our second round. We're at the 2-hour mark now. You can see the ribs have stayed very moist. They still look very juicy. So now it's time to wrap. All we're gonna do is take them off real quick. We're gonna put them into our wrap, add a little bit of butter and a little bit more of that mop sauce to keep them nice and tender inside of that wrap. So that way these things can finish off. Once we do take the ribs off of the smoker here, we are gonna bump the temperature up to 325 degrees. So just make sure that in between doing all of this, that you change the grill temperature to 325 degrees so that way they finish in roughly about another hour. Before I put these in the wrap, I do just want to show you a nice little close-up of the ribs. So far, they look phenomenal. They have a great color to them. They're still very moist. They felt very tender, and they're only gonna get more tender as they get closer to that doneness temperature. So everything's coming along really nicely to this point. Now you can't smell anything as you're watching a video, but if you were here, these smell amazing. So I'm really looking forward to how these are gonna turn out. So let's go ahead and finish getting these wrapped up so we can get them back on the smoker and get this cook all wrapped up. The wrapping process, it's super simple. Depending on how many slabs you have is just how many pieces of butcher paper you need to cut. When we wrap them, we are gonna put them face down in the wrap. So I know we were cooking them top side up, but for this portion, we're gonna do them face side down because when we pour more of that mop sauce over top of the ribs, we want them to sit and kind of baste a little bit in it. And so if they're top side up, most of it's gonna be on the underside, and the top part is really what we want to look really good, as well as that has a lot more of the meat to it than you do on the underside. So we want most of that flavor to stay there soaking into the top side. So I've got that one right there. I'm gonna move this one off to the side. And then what I'm gonna do is pull that, and then I'm gonna put some butter in here. I prefer unsalted. If you really wanna go with salted butter, you can. I think there's enough salt already on the seasoning that's on the ribs, so I don't think you need any more. Nothing over the top. You see I just got 4 nice squares of butter right there. I'm gonna set the ribs right on top of that. The heat from that is just gonna melt that butter. And then I'm gonna come back and do the same thing, so that way as this melts, it sits on this side as well, and then some of it's gonna run down. I'm not gonna do nearly as much. We'll just spread out the 3 of those there. And then we're gonna put more of the mop sauce in there. Don't have to go too crazy. I'll just finish that off right there. That's more than enough of what we need. So what is gonna be the best way for us to wrap these ribs? What I like to do is kind of skew it a little bit to one side, fold it over this way, fold everything over that way, and then I come back around on one side, and then I'm able to tuck it right underneath. That way that's gonna hold everything together for me. Just do it a little bit tighter. Keep that right there for you. One thing you can do, and I'm just gonna go ahead and do that, is you can double wrap. There's nothing wrong against double wrapping, and it'll allow you to have more insulation for the ribs. So when I double wrap these, I'm just gonna grab this here, put this down. Gonna wrap the one side over. We'll do it just like that. When you buy one of these 150-foot rolls of butcher paper, you might think that you need to be conservative with using it. Absolutely not the case. It takes me a long time to go through a full roll of these. Unless you are cooking and smoking every weekend with butcher paper, you're probably only gonna go through one of these rolls in an entire year, maybe 2 rolls a year. I go through it a little bit more, but in terms of actual just at-home cooking, it's about once a year. So don't be afraid to double wrap something. And it's not uncommon to double wrap either. There's plenty of people that will do that for briskets, pork butts, you name it. It's very common. So don't feel like you did something wrong if you're double wrapping. At the end of the day, it's more insulation, so it's protecting whatever it is that you're cooking from the heat, but it's also helping it cook better. So these are still gonna be super tender. There's not gonna be any effect whether it's 1 wrap or 2 wraps of the butcher paper on it. So we can just plop these right back down on there. And just let it go for the next hour. It's been a little over an hour, so now we're pretty much at the tail end of the cook here. What you want to do at this point, we haven't really talked about internal temperatures much, because for the most part, we're not too concerned about that throughout the cook. It's really just the tail end here that we are. So I'm gonna put my gloves on and then pull this, take a peek and see where we're at internal temperature wise, because we should be somewhere around, I would suspect, maybe the 201 to 203 range. 203 is gonna be absolutely perfect for us. So let's, or at least that's the temperature I believe is really good and what you want. Told you it'd be super easy to undo these. So let's get in there, make sure we're in one of the thicker parts and we're not on a bone. And yeah, we're actually a little bit over, but being over is not the end of the world. 203 is what we want with these. Let's see if we go to one of these thicker ones up here. Oh yeah. Oh yeah, these are super tender. There we go. We're just gonna hit them with this sauce. We'll spread it around. Okay, and just like that, all we're gonna do is give this 15 minutes for those 2 slabs for that sauce to tack on there. And then we're gonna pull them off and they're gonna be ready to go, but everything is looking phenomenal up to this point. These ribs are ready to come off the smoker. Take one last look at them. Those look phenomenal. Now it's time to eat. So let's get these off of here. Oh yeah. Super tender. Whew. Gotta be a little careful so they don't break on me. Before I get to slicing these ribs, I just want to show you, this is one of the main reasons why I love this drip pan. You see all of that mess down in there. I don't have to worry about that being charred onto anything. I don't have to worry about having to scrub the pan afterwards since I lined it with the foil. All I'm gonna have to do is once that's cool, just take the foil off, ball it up and throw it away. This pan, it's absolutely phenomenal. I love using it on a variety of cooks. That's why you want to get one of these pans. Now let's go slice these ribs up. For slicing them, super simple. If you want to do them top side up, you most definitely can. I like doing it on the underneath side. That way it's much easier to see what you're doing and you know that you're not hitting any of the bones. Look how juicy that is. Everything looks really solid up to this point, so the only thing left for us to do is do the taste test on this. This is something that I always do a terrible job of because you're supposed to take the teensiest, tiniest little bite so that way you're not really chewing for a long time on camera and you can describe kind of how it is, but I always like to take big bites. So this is super juicy, super tender. And it's got a very nice sweet bite to it at first, and then a couple seconds later, that heat kind of kicks in on the back end. Now, this isn't anything, it's like a fire alarm heat. I'm not someone that can handle a lot of heat, so it's a very good heat. It's not something that has me reaching for like milk or anything like that. And the other thing to note too, let me take another bite here. Is with ribs, you don't want them necessarily to fall off the bone. Not that that's a bad thing. That's just, at least in terms of competition ribs, not what you want. You want them to easily come off of the bone, but they still need to have a little bit of tear, so that way they don't just immediately slide off of the bone. And that's exactly what this has. If you look at this in the piece that I'm biting, for the most part, almost everything is coming cleanly right off of the bone, but it takes a little bit of tear to get to it, but that is the right consistency of what you want. Not too tender, and then at the same time, not too undercooked in a sense to where it's so hard and you gotta sit there and rip at it as hard as you can with your teeth. So in terms of how these came out and turned out, I told you at the beginning, these were gonna be amazing, juicy, phenomenal ribs, and that's exactly what we have here. What do we think? I think those ribs came out amazing. They were super simple, minimal effort, easy to replicate, and very interchangeable with whatever your favorite seasonings and sauces are, though I do recommend the flavor combos I used in this video. Now, if I did something that you still have a question on, leave it in the comments below, and I'll be sure to answer it for you. Don't forget, if you feel like this video helped you, please consider giving us a super thanks for a couple of dollars. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. I hope you enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. We'll see you soon.